Hello, welcome to the Positive Posting Conversation, the show about how to have a better relationship with your dog and cat. I'm Zazie Todd, author of the books Wag and Purr and creator of Companion Animal Psychology blog. My co-host Christy Benson is a dog trainer and anthropologist, and she also works for the Academy for Dog Trainers. We don't give advice on your pet, so if you have concerns, see your veterinarian, dog trainer or cat behaviourist as appropriate. Thanks for joining us today. In episode 7, we're joined by Jane Wolff of Good Wolff Dog Training to talk about kindness in dog training, both kindness to dogs and to their people, as well as Jane's interest in social justice. Then we talk about books, but be warned, there's a spoiler in this section. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Positive Post in Conversation. I'm Zazie Todd, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend and colleague, Christy Benson. Hi, Christy, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And today we have a very special guest, Jane Wolff. Jane is the co-owner of Good Wolff Dog Training in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And she specializes in treating separation anxiety, and she's a certified separation anxiety trainer. She also graduated with honors from the Academy for Dog Trainers and is certified through the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers as a CPDT-KA. She's been working with dogs professionally since 2014, and she loves working with dogs and their people. Hi, Jane. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, good. Thank you very much for coming to chat with us today. Our main theme is the topic of kindness in dog training to dogs and to their people. But first of all, can you tell me, how did you get into dog training?
I adopted difficult dogs. The first dog we always had dogs growing up, but the first dog I adopted as an adult, I was not prepared for at all. And she was really aggressive towards people, and I was way in over my head. So I hired dog trainers to help me, and they were not helpful at all and actually quite rude. And so I kind of just ditched that and managed some things, and my dog was okay, and then I adopted a second difficult dog who was even more difficult than the first. And but I adopted her from a colleague who was just starting out doing some training. And so I kind of just started tagging along with her, mostly to get help with my dog. And then pretty quickly was like, I like doing this. So I think the combo experience of feeling really not helped by a trainer, and then also like needing so much help with my dogs, I was like, I just think it should be easier than this. So yeah, here I am. Yeah.
And so then you went to study at the Academy for Dog Trainers. How did you get to there and decide that you wanted to specialize in separation anxiety?
Yeah, so I actually heard of the Academy for Dog Trainers because of Milena DiMartini. I had read her book. One of the many issues that my dog Nina had was separation anxiety. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do about this. And none of the advice I'm getting is helpful. And so I read her book and I was like, what does CTC stand for? I wonder. I had learned about this CPDT and was kind of headed towards that anyway. So I looked it up and then looked up what the Academy for Dog Trainers was. And then on top of that, Debbie Jacobs, who's another colleague, I read one of her books too and saw that she was also a student in the Academy. And so I was like, clearly this is where I have to go, because two of my like very influential people in my life have done this. And then I read a bunch of Jane's books and I was like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. So initially I didn't know that I wanted to just do separation anxiety. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but after my experience with my dog Nina and talking to other trainers, a lot of trainers being like, oh God, I don't want to ever do separation anxiety. That doesn't sound like fun at all to me. I was like, no, I can do this. I've done it, so yeah, after I graduated, I did a lot of stuff right after I finished school. And then pretty quickly was like, this is what I like doing. I don't really like working with aggressive dogs. It turns out I'm like a super big wuss. Like, that kind of stuff like really doesn't interest me at all. So, I just like, I think the other part, I apologize if I'm rambling a little bit about it, but I initially, when I was in college, I had considered going into social work and really just love humans so much. And so it was like, I think separation anxiety could be really good fit for me because I get to do the gratifying helping you with this really massive dog issue, and the I get to stare at cute dogs all day piece. So I got both, which was really nice. So yeah.
So when you were talking about like how you had hired an earlier trainer and they just weren't helping and they weren't, that great to work with, it sort of reminded me of like the 2 dog classes that I went to before I started to get into dog behavior more seriously. And they were both like not great. One was reasonable, I guess, but one was literally this old guy. And it was like the walking around in a circle with your dog on a choke, and they're just like healing all day and like giving them collar pops. That was like the majority of the class. And he wasn't very kind to me or my dog. And I went because I was having an issue with my dog. And in retrospect, obviously, like a behavior class wasn't what I needed to do with that dog.
Right.
But and I think it kind of, for a long time, turned me off of the idea of dog training as a profession, just because there was, I think, and we're talking about kindness. And so that's why I think sort of my brain went down this path. But he wasn't particularly kind to dogs or me. And it does, I think that's kind of a missing piece, maybe in like the 70s, 80s, 90s dog training sort of method and approach that really, I mean, we have to be cautious and cognizant that exists still. Okay. So what do you think is the most important way to show kindness to dogs, I guess is our first special question for Jane.
Yeah. Truly, like, just let them do whatever they want. It's really how I feel. Like I think, let dogs be dogs. Like, let them do stuff. I really think about, like, I might go into the weeds on this a little bit. I apologize, but I really feel like my relationship with my dog is both like helping them fit into my world and helping myself fit into their world a little bit, if that makes any sense. Like, that may be like way too up here a little, but truly, like, just spoil your dogs, like, all you want, and help them. And obviously too, the basic stuff, help them feel safe, train them humanely. But I think that all kind of falls under, like, let's just help them have fun. I've been thinking a lot lately about, like, I'm sorry, you guys, I'm going to go way into the weeds. I've been thinking a lot about, like, domesticated animals generally, and what a massive responsibility we have as human beings who have done this to like protect them in the world, in a way where I'm like, you guys, like, my pit bulls, they need so much from me. They could not survive outside on their own, especially while I'm in Michigan. So, they would probably just freeze. They hate it if it's 70 degrees or cooler. So, like, they're screwed outside, but I do just feel this, like, massive responsibility to, like, just make their lives so awesome. And, not to, like, make it real dark, I guess, but all of my dogs are suddenly seniors. And I think I realized the other day, like, oh gosh, like, my life with you is so short. And so, like, let's just live it up. Really. Like, I don't see any reason to like need to do anything except make their life great. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I really think, like, let them do dog stuff more than anything, so yeah, that's my very long-winded answer. I apologize.
Well, no, and you described that as going off into the weeds, but actually, if you think about the principles of good animal welfare, it includes letting dogs, or whatever animal you're talking about, engage in normal behaviors. And so letting them have fun is one way of framing that, I think, because that lets them engage in the things that they need to do and want to do. So
yeah.
not the weeds at all.
And, like, find joy in that too. Like, dogs are so, like, I always kind of joke, like, dogs are kind of terrible all the time. And I love that I really do think it's hilarious, and, like, try to find the joy in it. Like, Indy has dug himself a new dig pit in my yard where I don't particularly want it, to be honest, but it's really hilarious to, like, watch him, roll around in the dirt and just be insane. And, like, we're both just having so much fun while we're doing it. We're like, is it ideal for me? No, not really. But, like, does it matter? No, not at all, really. So yeah.
I think there's something, like, big to be gained, or that was gained when dog professionals started talking about, like, looking at dogs' lives through their own eyes, like that, the Umwelt kind of conversation that started happening maybe, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. I think that was a nice turning point, where people were like, instead of going, what can we do to change dogs, to be like, what the dog's experience of our world like, as a starting point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, like, like your previous experience, Christy, at your training class, I kind of lucked out. I went to a random training class because my dog was biting people when I was like 20. And so I was like, she needs basic obedience. Why I like nowadays, I'm like, I would have never allowed myself with that dog into my own basic manners class. Terrible idea. So I actually ended up though with somebody who was really pretty great. Like these treats, I want to say she encouraged us to try using a clicker, which I was like, I don't know what this thing is. And then this was a long time ago. I mean, this was like the early aughts still. So I was like, wow, it's pretty impressive. She sent me some resources because my dog tried to bite something during class. And she sent me like told me to read Don't Shoot the Dog. I think she maybe recommended one of Jane's books. And, so I kind of looked out in that sense. But the trainers I was hiring were like, you need to control your dog, like very much under the mindset of like, it almost felt like this dog that I have who I want to be my companion is more of like an item in my house and not like a living, breathing creature that I interact with and form a relationship with. It seemed much more like what she should do is be in the corner and stay there. And then when you want her to do something else, you tell her what else you want to do. And I was like, it's not like a appliance in my house. You know what I mean? Like she's my buddy. You know what I mean? I just don't want that relationship with her. So I think for me, like really leaning into like watching her just be a dog. And of course, making her feel safe too. I mean, obviously there were some big issues that I had to address, but I think once I just like let her be a dog and let her kind of tell me what she wanted, things got a lot easier and she stopped biting people. I really didn't do any training. Honestly, I just kind of managed the world and stopped putting her in situations where she would bite people. Kind of changed my behavior because of what she needed, so yeah, management for the win.
Yeah, so much training. So much training is actually management. But actually, both of you have now talked about dog trainers who were not very polite to you or even were actually rude to you. And I hear a lot of people say this. I get people email me sometimes telling me to things that their dog trainers have unfortunately said to them, which are not polite and not helpful. But of course, sometimes when you're working with someone and their dog, they do have to change what they do. So Jane, what advice do you have for trainers as the best way to talk to people about the things that they do need to change, that is a kind way of framing it and will help them to see why it matters?
Yeah, I think try to remember where you came from too. Like I think most dog trainers, maybe not all, and that's probably changing now too, but most dog trainers have been there. Like we've all done stupid stuff with our dogs. I absolutely did things to try to train my old dog, Sea Dog, that I'm not terribly proud of, but that's what I was being told to do. And we live in, our industry is unregulated, and so when people come to you and they're doing things that you're like, oh, that is a bad idea, like try to remind yourself of that, and so really like try to lead with some compassion, that like truly what they are trying to do their best right now, and believe them that is what they're trying to do. It might be wrong, but they are literally just trying to do their best. So I really try to lead with like, okay, I need to help you right now. Like this is, so I'm not going to judge you, I'm not going to yell at you, ever. I'm going to try to like meet them where they're at. And I think too, there is sort of an art to myth busting, like I'm not going to show up and be like, well, actually, because that's just, no one wants to hear that, and I think too, if you like immediately call people out, they're immediately on the defensive and it shuts down conversation. And so I think it's really about like reframing things in a way that, are relevant to that person and try to explain it in a way without judgment and with compassion that like, I understand why you are doing X, Y, and Z, but here's what I think we should do to alleviate this issue. And, and sometimes that means not necessarily correcting them too. Like there are things that I absolutely am like, we're just not talking about that. And that's fine. It's not affecting anything. We're not going to worry about it. We've got a different plan. And to be honest with you, like a lot of that I learned from Jean Donaldson too. I mean, like client counseling, that aspect of the Academy for Dog Trainers, I think was like so monumentally important and useful to me. So yeah, that, and really like after I saw that would be covered in the course material and stuff, I was like, yes, please take all my money. I want to do that. So, yeah. So I think, yeah, like reframing things in ways that people can really understand and are useful, and don't be judgy about it. You know, like you can reframe things for people without making them feel bad about their choices, and really assure them that like you're there to help them. This is kind of a team joint effort here. You're not there to just like bully them. So yeah, I unfortunately talked to a lot of people too who were like, you know, the last dog trainer I hired yelled at me. I'm like, why would you ever yell at someone? I can't imagine doing that to somebody, but it unfortunately is very common. So yeah.
One of the things that I do at the academy, I don't know if you two know this, as I grade we have an assignment that's for client reframes, like how to sort of, you get a question from a client or a student in class, and you sort of have to provide, as a student, you have to provide how you would respond. But it's interesting, I think, because one of the things that we're learning in the academy is that humans are animals too, and we learn in sort of specific ways. And yes, we have to be clever and finesse things as dog trainers. You know, like I'm not going to pull out like a sports analogy to someone who's like me and not sporty at all.
Right, totally.
But still, just that, you know, there are good ways to approach people, and not, I mean, taking it sort of as a granted that we want to be kind to the people who have hired us. We want to be kind to the people who are coming to us and saying, please help me with my dog, right? I mean, I think that's just a given. But also that there are specific ways for us to change behavior, you know, in humans as well as in dogs. And so bringing that together and being like, there's a kind way, because we're going to put kindness, sort of, this is what we want to do as humans to each other, you know, but also there are specific formulas and ways that we can be kind that will sort of evince behavior change in our clients and in their dogs. So it's interesting to me that there's some science to it, you know, there's a craft and there's skill, but there's also like, we can look at the science and sort of be like, here's how we can change people's behavior.
I mean, that's one thing I think about a lot, is that like, as force-free trainers who are like, here's how to change behavior, you know, that even in the force-free world, I don't always see people really using that knowledge with other people too. And it's like, you guys, we learn the same way. Like, it's not, you know, you can use these same principles. And so I think about that a lot. Like, if I'm talking to somebody, what can I reinforce? What do I want more of? You know, like, wow, you're doing such a good job with this. Say that, you know, like you have to try to reinforce people for that, you know, or like, maybe we need to manage the situation a little bit better so this isn't happening anymore. And I don't necessarily need to like, I think we're really like socialized with humans to scan and punish. And I think it's really important that, especially knowing what we know about how to change behavior, that we are applying the same principles to our human clients. The thing I try to remind myself a lot is that like, my client is the person. My client is not the dog. I mean, yes, the dog is a part of it, but like ultimately that human is is not only the person paying me, but is the person that is the subject here, really, you know, like, yeah, I can train your dog to do stuff. You don't even necessarily need to be there for that. But like, I then need to teach that person how to maintain that and, you know, all of these types of things. So I think, yeah, it always breaks my heart when dog trainers are like, I love the dogs, it's the people I don't like. And I'm like, man, then you don't like then you got to maybe get a different job, you know, or like change how you feel about this, you know? So
I think one of the ways that sorry, Zazie,
No, I was just going to say that I think good people skills are an essential part of being a good dog trainer. So yeah, sorry, Christy, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, to take the kindness conversation one step further, I think it's okay to be kind to ourselves and to as dog trainers, and just be like, yes, we will want to punish people for doing bananas things with their dogs, you know, and that's okay. And even like on social media, like if, you know, you're scrolling and you see something and you're just like, my hands are just like, they want to type, you know, I'm like, or even people who respond to my own business page posts. Sometimes I'm just like, oh man, I could eviscerate you right now. but is that useful? No. And then I'm not going to like judge myself. I'm going to be like, yeah, that's like a really normal human thing. So I'm not like a bad person for wanting that, but I'm not going to go ahead and release the hounds on random people, you know, because it's not useful.
You know, really too, like kindness is kind of a practice. Like you do have to, we are not socialized to lead with that. We are socialized to, and that's why it's so easy to like get on the internet and start screaming at people. That's why people do it, because it feels, it's reinforcing to the punisher. We know that, it's easy, it's accessible, and you don't have to necessarily be held accountable. And we've been socialized to do it. And we really do prop that kind of thing up frequently. Like if you think about what we see in media across all types of media all the time, like people get reinforced for behaving that way, and so I do think it is like a practice too, to be like, oh God, I really want to yell at you. Like, please don't do this. And then having to like take a step back and be like, okay, no, I have to think about this rationally. And I will say, it, like anything else that you practice, it gets easier. Like I do think that even people I don't like or things I don't like, I can lead with some amount of empathy and kindness in all situations. There's this is interesting too. I was having a conversation recently with somebody about the difference between niceness and kindness. And I do think there's a big difference there. You can be very kind and you don't necessarily have to be super nice all the time, if that makes sense. Like I think you can not like something and be like, no, but still lead with that kindness of like, okay, I know better than to like lean into this base instinct, be like, shut up, so yeah.
Yeah, I think also you can be super nice, but not kind at all, because there can be something very, very cold and angry behind that apparent niceness. So,
yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
definitely.
So one of the, because you do a lot of separation anxiety, or exclusively separation anxiety now.
Pretty much exclusively, yeah.
Right. So I think you're coming up against a lot of, and I don't do any separation anxiety, and this is why. It's because you have to sort of get across to people that they can no longer leave their dog alone. And I think this would be, for me, a really hard one, that convincing component. So just like in the sort of the context of being kind to your clients, how do you approach that?
So I will say it's easier than you think. I would say that now, granted, the people that are contacting me maybe already know that I'm going to ask them to do that. I make it really obvious on my website. It's obvious in any like literature that I put out. It's a question on my contact form. So I might have a very biased sample size. But I will say that most people that I talk to are either already doing it or relieved to hear that that's what I'm recommending. Like a lot of people are still leaving their dog home alone, mostly because someone told them that they should. You know what I mean? So I think most of the time I get this like, okay, good. And I think too, I often, I mean, really not leaving your dog home alone is like any other type of management. Like, if a dog was aggressive towards children and they were like, yeah, and he goes to the daycare I run in my basement every day, I'd be like, oh, more of that. I think trainers generally are pretty okay with asking people to do that. But then when it comes to not leaving alone, it's like, oh my God, how on earth would I even do that? So if anyone is nervous about that, don't be. You probably do this all the time. But usually what I'll do is just explain to people why, which is really like, we have to protect the training that you are going to do. So there's no, I'm not going to take your money if we're not doing this, because it's a waste of your time. And it's obviously a welfare issue too. And I usually will explain that too, that, your dog's having a panic attack and people, if your dog's panicking at home, they're also experiencing that either through the stress of knowing or seeing their dog having such a hard time, or because they get home and their house is destroyed. Like it's really upsetting to get home and see that your dog has chewed through your door. Like that's, man, just so heartbreaking. So I explain that piece, explain why we're doing it, to protect all of that and to prevent this other stuff. And then I really try to help them figure that out. Like I am there to support them. I can't work with somebody who's not doing it, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to just ditch them. Like I give people ideas. I try to network. If there's compounding issues that are going to make that really hard to do, I try to get them help with that. So, thankfully my wife is also a dog trainer and she does a lot of fear and aggression stuff. So I can be like, let's make your dog a friend or whatever. So it really is kind of I see it really as sort of a team effort. and so I try to like give them as much support as I possibly can. And then maybe recommend some things in the meantime. I try to really reassure people too, like, you may not be able to figure this out today, and that's fine. We're going to figure this out. So it's really like baby steps at times, depending on people's schedule. So yeah, I haven't run into too much of a problem with it, honestly. And, Milena DiMartini collects some data on some of that too. And also it's, most people don't give us too much pushback, thankfully. So, yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Good. I like how you frame it as a team effort as well. And I think that speaks to kindness as well, because we're all on the same team and you want to be kind to your teammates.
Totally. And I mean, sometimes because I do separation anxiety, I take clients anywhere in the world. Sometimes I can be more helpful than others, but I mean, sometimes this is why social media is pretty all right. It's like I can connect with other people if I need to. Next week, I'm driving about 2 hours away to go house sit for a former client because she needs somebody. So like I will physically do it if I can. And if I can't, then I'll definitely find somebody. And it definitely is a team effort, So.
Great. And so you actually also do a lot of work in the social justice realm as well. And I wondered if you could tell us something about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I feel weird feeling I do a lot of work in this realm because I feel like there's a lot more I could be doing, but I'm trying. And I primarily lately have been mostly doing some work with some local mutual aid groups in my community, trying to help build community and get people stuff that they need and get stuff that I need, and kind of like really team effort. Team effort, whole thing, but in life too. So I do a lot of volunteering with a local group called Pet Pals Mutual Aid. And what we do is kind of act as a sort of hub. So if people want to get rid of pet stuff, we can get it. If people need pet stuff, we will try to get it or distribute what we have. And that could be anything from food to cat litter to toys. I'll offer free training or advice. We try to get, it's two big issues that we're trying to work with right now. Two is vet care, because it's really expensive and hard to get, and also shelter. The group was founded by a woman who also works with the unhoused community in the area. And shelters are a really big deal because we have 4 seasons, and in the summer it's super hot, and in the winter it's super cold. And most of the warming and cooling shelters don't allow pets. And then that is puts people in a really tough situation where they don't want to get rid of their pets, but it's below freezing and snowing outside, and they live in a tent, so it's really pretty tough. So if we can, whenever we get monetary donations, we'll try to put people up in hotels. Like over the summer, we had a couple, like a week span here or there where the heat was out of control and it was super humid. And I don't know if you've ever been in a tent in the middle of the summer when it's humid, but it's like a little furnace in there. And so we would like put people up in hotels temporarily. We're constantly talking about creating a Pet Pals Palace, which is basically just an open space where people can live with their animals if they need to. That has not happened yet, but we would love it to. And then the vet piece of it too, because I'm a dog trainer and because people know that I'm a dog trainer and a lot of vets refer to us, I'm trying to use that to get vets to offer free vet care, or at least like free vaccine clinics and things like that. I also do a monthly, participate in a really cool monthly mutual aid fair called Pullover Prevention. And sometimes I'm there under my dog trainer hat, but sometimes I'm just there to fix cars, which is also super fun for me and not like dog training at all. But basically in the Pullover Prevention Clinic, we do minor repairs to people's cars so that they can avoid unsafe or unwanted interactions with police. So we do like headlights, taillights, basic, put your bumper back on, that kind of stuff. And so it's really fun. I quite like tinkering around on cars too. So it's a very, very good time. Yeah. The mutual aid fair too, they do all kinds of fun stuff. Like there'll be, it's basically like a collection of a lot of local groups that come together to get people stuff that they need. So there's other people there doing like harm reduction stuff, passing out like safer sex kits, Narcan, things like that, car seats, tents, clothing. Yeah, it's a really, really good time. Yeah. We do that monthly. Oh, there's a free food truck. It's such a good time. I love it so much. And then I think too, the others, this is something I'd love to do a lot more of, but also I've been thinking and talking a lot about prison and police abolition, and trying to get my fellow dog trainers to also chat with me about this and kind of work through some of these issues. I've done some in-person chats too, just trying to, because I don't know everything. I don't know all the answers. So sometimes I'm like, can we just like talk this out and try to figure out like what we want to get behind? What kind of needs do we need to fill? So yeah, that's, a lot of mutual aid stuff mostly.
That's amazing. You're amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
So how has your work, like in that realm and in the social justice realm, do you think that that sort of impacted how you approach your clients?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially thinking more about prison and police abolition, a big part of that world too is leading with kindness and compassion and recognizing that harm comes from unmet needs. And so I think it has really shifted how I view clients coming to me with issues, especially some of those issues that you're like, oh my God, why are you doing this? It's probably because something is happening, and I think another piece of, a need is not being met is really what I mean by something is happening. When we think too about like, how not useful punishment can be for changing human behavior in the long run, and the fallout of using punishment both with people and with dogs. I think about that a lot in terms of how I deal with my clients too. Like if, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, like if I can lead with like, my base instinct says punish this. I know that will not be helpful or could really make things worse. So how can I problem solve this in another way? I've also been getting into some like restorative or transformative justice stuff too. So I think it's also really changed how I talk to people, that like, again, we're coming together to problem solve this. And so we need to try to communicate about that in a way. Not that I'm like sitting down with clients and being like, here's our restorative justice session, or anything, but I really do try to lead with like, I want to meet this person where they're at. I want to communicate with them in a way that is equal, where I'm not necessarily being like, hi, I'm the authority and just demanding that you do X, Y, and Z. This is really like you and I are coming together to do this thing. So
I think it is so much more likely to stick if you're like, what can your life support? What makes sense to you?
Yeah.
What would you rather deal with first? I think
totally.
I think if we just are like, and here's my blanket approach, it's less likely, I think, for any one particular person in their particular instances and life, it's less likely to be useful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Definitely. Mm-hmm. It also has made me really question and think more too about like policies that are in place for dealing with animals, like whether that's the way that like shelters and rescues adopt out their animals or take their animals in, or the how, when, and why animal control is called, all of these kinds of things. I do try to really think about the bigger picture and the bigger impact that some of those choices can make, can cause. And then like, how could I instead like fill this immediate need that would prevent these other systems from like kicking off? So like a good example, part of why we do, why Pet Pals exists is because there is a food pantry at our local Humane Society, but there are a lot of barriers to using that. You get put on a list where you cannot then adopt any animals. You can only go at certain times. There's no transportation to get there. There's no bus line. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, all of these things. And then so people don't utilize it. And it's like, well, that's not helpful. Like here, do you need dog food? I have extra. Here, take it, And so, I think, the biggest thing for me really is like not scanning and punishing and really looking at it as a team effort, us together. So I think it's also made me trust people more. So like yes. I do like baseline, like, hey, I really trust you a lot and I like you. And so let's start from there. So
I love the way that our conversation about kindness has moved on from not just being about kindness between individuals, but how structural factors and systemic issues affect things too. I think that's really important. Yeah. But we have to move on to books in a moment. So before we move on, is there anything else that you want to say, Jane, about kindness and in dog training?
Trust people, like trust your clients. And I think if you lead with that, you're probably going to lead with being more kind towards them too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us about that. And now we're going to move on to books. So we get to have a really fun discussion about books too. I'm going to lead first with the book of the month for the Animal Book Club, and then we're going to go around everyone with our own personal picks. So first of all, the Animal Book Club this month is reading Wonder Dog. This is the English version of it. So actually the North American version has a different cover, but it's very hard to get hold of in Canada. So that's why I've got the English version. This is Wonder Dog, How the Science of Dogs Changed the Science of Life by Jules Howard. And it is an absolutely brilliant read. He's an amazing writer. It's actually brilliantly told as a story. I found it riveting, and it's the history of the science of dogs from really like from Darwin basically, and it goes through things that you know about as well as including things that you don't know about, and it doesn't shy away from the fact that unfortunately some of the research on dogs, especially early research on dogs, actually was quite unpleasant for the dogs, but he handles it really well. So he kind of refers to it in the text and he puts all the gruesome gory details in footnotes, so you can choose whether or not you want to read about some of that stuff. And it's just really interesting, and along the way he highlights some of the special dogs that have contributed to this research. So it's just a really interesting, fascinating read, and in a way it's the history of psychology as told through dogs, as opposed to all the experiments that people have done on rats and mice. So I think that's great. That's Wonder Dog, and it's this month's choice for the book club, and it's just brilliant, really fascinating. So Jane, what book are you reading at the moment?
Yeah, that actually is pretty relevant because I have Pitbull. And this book came out a while ago. I don't remember actually when this book came out. But it talks about like the history of the breed, pit bulls. So it's actually kind of relevant. And I super want to read that book that you just mentioned. 2016 is when this one came out. Yeah, this book was amazing. I will admit, I have pit bulls. I love pit bulls. They're my favorite dog ever. I just think they're so cute, and I love terriers. And so I'm a little biased. But I really like this book because it does basically go over like the history of pit bulls in our society and what a big deal that really is. So I think why this is really interesting is you do learn a lot about the breed and the history of the breed, kind of where they came from and how they've been seen in society throughout time and how that's changed and transformed. But it also is really interesting because of the social aspect too, of like how like our dogs and domesticated animals, like how we view them is also how we view the people that have them, and like, so it is really very fascinating, in terms of like looking, kind of using dogs to look at the larger social picture too. So it's an excellent book. There's definitely some tough parts to read. I have a very low tolerance for like any kind of animal abuse or gory stuff. So there's definitely some tough parts, but I do think like the overall story is so good that kind of makes it a bit easier to get through. And it's not all just like dog fighting 24/7, or anything. So yeah, it really is a fantastic book and I highly recommend. It's also well written. I found it to be a very good read. A lot of info, but doesn't feel like now I'm reading a wall of facts,
So that's Pitbull by Bronwyn Dickey. And I have to say, I'm really glad you chose it because I love that book too. And I think it's so well written, so fascinating, and such an interesting social history as well of America, I think. Yeah, cool. Christy, what book are you talking about today?
Well, I actually have picked, so I'm picking this book because it's Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. And it's actually a graphic novel. And I picked it because at least one of our dogs is like, we have a gate across our one of our bookshelves because one of our dogs was just eating books all the time. And so he somehow recently, or maybe Sitka or the puppies, I'm not sure, has learned to like reach through the holes in the gate and pull books out. And they started pulling out. We used to have like the entire collection of Alison Bechdel's. She writes a comic, or has written a comic since maybe like the 80s, called Dykes to Watch Out For. So it's like this really important sort of canon of lesbiana in North America. And, you know, like coming out as a queer person in the 90s, it wasn't like today where there's a lot more access to media about ourselves. So this was like a really important way to like find a community, you know? So we used to have the entire collection of all of her books, but the dogs have like one at a time and pulling them out and eating them. And it's like, I know I should feel bad, like, oh my God, my book collection is decreasing, but it just kind of feels like, oh, I don't know. It feels like, oh, well, this has passed and now I'm going to throw this one out. And then another one comes out a week later or something. But anyway, so seeing that diminishing bookshelf has led me to remember this book, which I read before when it first came out. So it's a graphic novel about her life, like as a young woman growing up. Her dad, it's largely about her relationship with her dad. Her dad was a gay man married to his mom, and was also what do you call it, when they had a funeral home and he like handled the bodies. So he would create bodies that were sort of funeral worthy. So anyway, don't listen for the next 2 minutes if you don't want spoilers to the book. But he ends up dying, and it's sort of, the question is whether or not it was a suicide, and so anyway, it was sort of like, it's like almost like a coming of age, and her dealing with the question of her dad, and you know, she came out to her dad, and all of a sudden they had so much to talk about. But she also she's super, super brilliant, and knows all of this stuff about books. Like, she's really into literature, which I'm not, but she's so good at writing all of these, like, you know, like allegories to other like super literary books that you know that she's doing it, and you can appreciate the cleverness of it even if you don't know what the source material is. So she's just like that good to you're like, I bet this is something, you know, she's making a point here, or she's using, you know, this literary source material to sort of shine a light on her own experience. So it's really good. It's an interesting book. It's sad, you know, because it's talking about obviously like someone's death, and then it's morbid, which I love. But also she's, you know, it's he passed away, I think, just before AIDS really became a huge thing. And so she's like talking about that and what that affected her mom. And so anyway, it's good, and it's relevant, and it's super easy to read because it's a graphic novel, but her art is also, you know, right. It's amazing. It is. Yeah. It tells us stories. Usually I'm not like a comic person or an art person at all, but her art adds so much to her stories. So that's my choice.
Cool. Thank you. Go on, Jen.
I used to work at a gay and lesbian bookstore, and we had like all the volumes of Dykes to Watch Out For and Fun Home. And I would just, on slow nights, sit there and read all of it all the time. It's so good.
Good. Okay. And so the book I'm going to talk about now is Invisible Boy by Harrison Mooney, that I've just finished reading. And it is a memoir of his childhood, really. Growing up as an adopted Black boy in a white evangelist Christian family in Abbotsford, which is kind of part of the Bible Belt close to where I live. And as you can imagine from that framing, it's quite a difficult story. It's absolutely heart-wrenching in parts. He did not really know any other Black people growing up. Still is a very white town. And so it's the story of his childhood growing up through that. He's got a wry sense of humor, so it makes it possible to read some of these awful experiences. And towards the end, you get to learn how he came to meet his biological mother. And he went to university, and he, as part of one of the classes he was taking, he started to read writers like James Baldwin and so on. And so it's about the development of his sense of his own identity as well, and kind of leaving his past behind. And I've seen him talking about it on Twitter, and he says none of his family have contacted him since he wrote this book, which anyway. But I feel like it's an important read, and because there are quite a lot of interracial adoptions, and I grew up in a family with one. I have a Black adopted sister. Our story is very, very different from this, but I wanted to read it because of that, and it's a really excellent read. It's a brilliant book, actually. So that's that, and I will put all of these books in the show notes. So there will be links to those there. And Jane, if people want to find out more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you could always go to our website, goodwolff.com. Wolf is with 2 F's because that's my last name. So we're also on Facebook and Instagram. Our social media presence is slightly low, but feel free to reach out if you want to chat. And truly, if anybody's like, I want to talk about kindness or prison and police abolition and how that relates to dog training, I'd want to. So please bug me. I would love to chat. So yeah.
Cool. And you take separation clients by distance, so people who want someone to work with them with SEPANCs can get in touch as well.
Absolutely. Anywhere in the world. If you have the internet, I can help. So yeah.
Jane just, I'm not sure if I'd mentioned this earlier, Zaddy, so I apologize, but Jane just released her course on school. So she has a grooming course that's available through Christy Benson Dog Training. And you can read about it on my website, which is christybenson.com. And then sign up if you want to. So
yeah, and
you will experience nothing but kindness in the course, I promise.
And cute pit bulls the whole time. So
lovely.
And truly too, that's my other like real love in dog training is doing handling stuff. So also if you just want to talk about that, I'd love to. So bug me.
Brilliant. And I'll make sure that link is in the show notes too. And thank you so much, Jane, for coming to chat with us. It's been a really fun chat.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I super appreciate it. This is fun.
Thank you. And everybody watching, if you hit the subscribe button, then you'll make sure that you see all future episodes of this as well. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Bye all.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Positive Posting Conversation. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to the show and write us a review via your podcast app. For the show notes, visit companionanimalpsychology.com. This show was produced by Zazie Todd. The music is Melody from Paris by Studio Le Bousse. See you next time.